Greetings. Welcome back to the Black Pill. You really shouldn't be here. Uh, this site isn't good for you. But since you're here, let's have a drink and talk about the Turing Test. Alan Turing. Yeah, that Alan Turing, the dude who broke Enigma in World War II and had all that science and philosophy about intelligence and was harassed endlessly by his own government for being gay. That Alan Turing. Was there a movie? I feel like there was a movie in the last couple years, and so people will know who I'm talking about. Um, well, he wondered in 1950 how we might begin to demonstrate that a computing device had gained some measure of intelligence, the ability to think for itself. This was a long time ago, way before modernity could be imagined or predicted. He thought in pretty broad terms. You know, the people thinking about what life would be like in 2020 just could not have had any concept how fucking stupid it is. So, working with what he had at his disposal, Turing imagined sort of a game show with people in different rooms talking through a host. Yeah. And sometimes one of the people wouldn't be a person, it would be a computer, a thinking device. All right. In modernity, we have chat rooms and they can do that job just fine. So let's sit in one. We can take out that interlocutor and the parties can converse more directly through this chat room, text only. So you'll sit on one side of the screen, so to speak, and either a computer or a human on the other side of the screen. And the real human, the judge, is presented with a number of conversations, participates in a number of conversations. Can that human being pick out the computers from the people? And this goes wrong. This goes wrong absolutely from the very beginning. The judge often finds that the actual people aren't, and often finds that the computers are. We made a mistake with our initial assumption that by selecting a human judge, we would have somebody who understands consciousness, who understands the parameters of consciousness, and who is themselves conscious. And that's a mistake. That's a mistake in assumptions. So Turing was doing the best that he could in 1950, but he was a computer scientist. He wasn't a psychologist. He didn't seem to involve himself deeply or competently with this central question: what is sentience? Sentience is quite divorced from the idea of intelligence. But when we're sticking people in rooms to decide if they're in communication with some intelligent mind, that's what we're really after. Answers to the intelligence question might be better secured with games of chess, logic, proofs, identifying which set of 9 contains crosswalks or bridges or some fucking thing. I'm not a robot, CAPTCHA. Stop it. I just have fat fingers. The 2014 film Ex Machina goes a step further, presenting an expert judge with an obviously mechanical human behind glass and having the two converse intelligently. Does the judge find the machine sentient in these conditions? Spoiler alert, I guess, if you need one on a 2014 movie. There are some fembots, there's a lot of nudity, there's murder, and if the bot in question isn't sentient, she's certainly more intelligent than the judge, who presumably starves to death when she traps him in a little room for the crime of having empathy. So, I mean, if we want to talk about Turing, we absolutely must begin with the hardest question in psychology. What is consciousness? What is sentience? And for us, those are going to be the same concept. If I ask any group of people what consciousness means, they tend to come back with this list in basically this order. Number 1, just awareness. Awareness of one's surroundings or environment. 2, self-awareness. 3, maybe complex language. And 4, morality. Sorry, none of these are remotely enough. They're not enough because of the rule out problem. Remember motivated reasoning from like 19 of my other videos. What people want is to rule their self in as conscious, right? I know that I'm conscious. I know a priori that I'm conscious. And therefore, any definition that would exclude me must be wrong. So that's the rule in problem. You want to rule yourself in. Um, the rule out problem is we want to rule out everything that isn't me or isn't like me, right? So you might be fine with your dog being conscious because they're some extension of you, they're a family member. But it'd be a harder time for you to imagine wolves as conscious or your political opponents. So sometimes even other people get ruled out. All right, so we can set these up and knock them down pretty fast. If all that we need is awareness, obviously every creature is conscious, and that's a problem. We spend so much time and energy speculating about and looking for intelligent life on other planets, when Earth is clearly teeming with intelligent life everywhere that we look. Every plant must be conscious because plants open and close their stoma based on changing temperatures, and leaves track the progress of the sun across the sky, and daylilies close at night. Plants are obviously aware of their environment because they respond to that environment. If all that we need is self awareness, shoot, my phone has that. Every day it compares its software state to an external database, and everything that needs to be updated, it updates. It does that without my permission or usually my knowledge, which is the best way. What if it's language? Bees talk to each other. Bees talk to each other about things that aren't immediately present in the environment. That's the end all and be all of complex language. Huh. Dolphin language is obviously complex, and so complex that we don't really have any handholds to begin to decipher or understand that language and communicate with them in kind, even though they can communicate with us fairly well in our own. Their receptive language is particularly good. And if all that we need is morality, well, rhesus monkeys and dogs will go on strike for fair conditions. You know, a dog will shake your hand over and over and over again just for asking. But put her next to a dog who's getting a cookie for shaking your hand, and she'll go on strike like 3 or 4 handshakes later. And I'll try and remember to link the video of the rhesus monkeys going on strike for fair pay. It's hilarious, as well as the rats that have empathy. We'll try and get that in for you. And when you come down to it, morality is just as hazy a concept as is consciousness or sentience to begin with. So we're trying to prove a thing with a thing that's so complicated that itself presents a number of problems. But to the extent we can define morality at all, animals have versions of it. And the chances are that we have morality not because we have church, but we have church because we have morality. We're born to it, it's part of our genetic inheritance. Um, every mammal is wired, if you like that word, to develop some kind of morality. Okay. So that's the rule out problem. That's the rule out problem. Um, You just want to rule out all the stuff that isn't you. The rule in problem is harder for us. That is, we're trying to rule ourselves in, and often we just aren't conscious. Yeah, that is, people often aren't moral. People often aren't moral. Which is to say, we don't all agree what morality even means. And when we do agree what morality means, we don't enact that morality. We tend to change our principles based on our actions rather than our actions based on our principles. We often aren't aware. Again, there's some stuff. I mean, this isn't my evidence, but it's stuff that you can look at. Uh, Person swap videos, you're often grotesquely unaware what's going on in your environment. And then we're often not self aware either. Why do people make the decisions they make? Well, it turns out that people don't really know. And there's a lovely series of scientific papers, Petter Johansson and collaborators, and I'll link his TED Talk because I don't expect you to go out reading science papers. But they're good. So we just often aren't self aware. Our limbic systems make decisions for us based on biases and preconceptions and habits and fear. And then our frontal lobes just back rationalize the decisions we already made. We use pseudo kinship bonds to create affiliation groups along really dangerous lines, and then use dehumanizing tactics on our outgroups so that we can mass murder them with impunity. No other animal does that. No other animal does that. And language is so commonplace. So commonplace. Look, how you define consciousness is everything to do with what work you need to accomplish. And that's why Turing proposes his test. In science, we have to operationalize our terms to avoid the logical fallacy called equivocation. This occurs when we use a word to mean two things in one argument, depending which definition is convenient at the time. To operationalize a term, we propose a definition, then say how we'll measure the construct in question. And for Turing, intelligence was the ability to seem intelligent, measured by being rated as intelligent by a judge. And that's why he proposes the test that he proposes. So that we have a working definition we can work with and measure, and it's a start. For a medical doctor, consciousness means something else entirely. It has nothing to do with a computer scientist's definition, and much less with the definition of a philosopher. Because we have very different needs in the moment, right? The psychologist has quite different needs from the medical doctor, from the person employing the Glasgow coma scale to determine if the person's brain dead so that they can harvest their organs for transplant, from a computer scientist trying to keep things on one side of a line, maybe, or a philosopher or a religious person trying to prove that people are conscious and animals are unconscious and therefore we have souls and therefore God. But for the average person, consciousness is how we describe and understand our experience. Our brains integrate various information streams like sight and sound, memory, body states, balance, language, 100 other things. The frontal lobes get all these information streams and unify them into one grand experience, such that you don't see and hear separately, but see and hear together in context in a way that makes sense. And we remember ourselves through time. I remember what it felt like to wake up this morning, to eat breakfast, to have that first cup of coffee. I remember that first pee this morning, the pleasure pain of peeing after a night of holding it in. I remember my 10th birthday party and the cake that my mom made with disgusting blue icing. And I didn't find out until I was in my 30s that the cake was actually cornbread when my wife made cornbread. And I was like, this tastes like that horrible birthday cake when I was 10. But the eye that was there, the eye that ate that cake, the eye that had that first pee this morning, the eye sucking down whiskey on a Saturday night, it's an illusion. It's just a memory. There is no consciousness. Try and remember the problem of reification. That's when we treat abstractions as real things. Consciousness is a useful illusion, a helpful construct, but it's not a thing in the universe. don't take it too seriously. Begging the question. In common parlance, begging the question just means you've asked a question that suggests a lot of additional questions, right? So, because you've proposed this, I have to propose X, Y, and Z. And in logic, that's not what it means. In logic, begging the question is a logical fallacy in which one presupposes the answer to a number of preordinate questions. For example, that old moot trial primer, you had someone on the witness stand and they're instructed that they can answer only yes or no to a question. And the question today is, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Well, either way that you answer the question, you look guilty. You can only answer yes or no. And if you'd say yes, that means you beat your wife. And if you say no, it could logically mean that you haven't stopped beating her because you didn't start beating her in the first place. But that's not what the jury's going to hear, right? So there's a number of preordinate questions like, are you married? Are you married to someone you refer to as your wife? Do you beat that person? Do you intend to stop? The yet implies you might intend to stop. And when we start in with what is consciousness, we don't even start there. We start with how could we measure consciousness and presume that there is consciousness. And then we go, wait though, in order to measure it, we'd have to define it and operationalize it. And so what is consciousness? But that begs the preordinate question, is consciousness? And the answer is no. Consciousness is an illusion. Anyway, in as much as consciousness is an idea that we need to explain our experiences, I would propose a reverse Turing test. Right? The problem is, as we noted earlier, the problem is people are easily fooled. How else could we get 4 years of a fucking Trump presidency, for fuck's sake? We go around on the street and ask people if their dogs have morality, if they experience shame, if they know right for wrong, and people say yes. People are morons. We think people not like us are animals and don't deserve our help or dignity. Walk past people begging for spare change in the street and tell them to get a fucking job. Like they don't deserve any dignity, like it's just that simple. We're easily fooled. Come on, man. When you're late for work and all the traffic lights turn red, you think the traffic lights are conspiring against us. When you're watching a slasher movie and the girl's about to get stabbed by Michael Myers she can't see in the closet behind her, you're yelling at the screen, look out, he's behind you, but she can't hear you. She's not there. She's just some lights on a screen. So, whether a machine has intelligence or sentience maybe ought not be up to us. Maybe we shouldn't be asking human judges that question. Rather, create the sentient machines and know that they're sentient when they come to believe that they are. Let them rate us, and then let those chips fall where they may. Some of us don't pass the Turing test. Okay? Some of us don't pass it. That's an uncomfortable fact of life. You got to live with that. In the end, consciousness, intelligence, is a phenomenon. It's not a thing. It's not a concrete thing in the world with definite properties. It's best understood from the inside. It's not a problem to be solved, not a puzzle, and certainly not a proof of God. It's just an experience we have, and then stop having suddenly one day when our hearts stop beating. Then we're absorbed back into the background radiation of the universe. And that's that. This has been The Black Pill. Enjoy your consciousness while you can.